Next week, we'll be talking about puberty, which I'm very excited about. So I did all my dissertation research on puberty in Brangus cattle. So I'll share a little bit of that with you. But after that, we really get into applying everything that we have learned through the first part of the semester. And so that is what we are doing. I'm going to switch to a headset because I hear people coming in and I will get distracted. So hang with me for just a second. All right, there we go. So. Okay, and I know we've got some folks that are just joining us. So again, here's the link for Poll Everywhere. If you guys haven't had a chance to answer this first question, how are you feeling about classes? Please go ahead and do that now. I'm going to jump on with my tablet too, just in case we need to draw anything out. So let me take just a second to do that. Okay, Elizabeth, I see your message. Thanks for letting me know. I know sometimes phones are wonky unless you have the app downloaded, so that might be the issue. There we go. Okay. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started with some Poll Everywhere rapid fire questions. All right. So the way I've got this set up is we are, as soon as I find my timer, there we go. We're going to do 15 seconds per question. Okay. So the whole point of this is for you guys to start committing this stuff to memory. All right. So, I don't want to spend a ton of time, and we've got like 11 questions to get through. So I don't want to spend a ton of time letting you guys look up answers and stuff to questions. And so I am capturing this on the recording. So if you need to go back later on and review the recording just to make sure you have the questions and stuff, that is absolutely okay. And now I'm looking at myself because I got my tablet on. That's awkward. There we go. Okay. All righty. So again, 15 seconds. So you guys get in whatever position you need to for rapid fire Poll Everywhere questions. Okay, here we go. All right, so first rapid fire question. GnRH is produced in which tissue? All right, 15 seconds, guys. 5 to go.
We can't see it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm
Yeah, it's
timing
not coming up.
myself. I'm sorry. There we go. Let's try it now. Okay, we'll start it over. All right, 15 seconds. GnRH is produced in which tissue? Five to go. And let's get them submitted now. All right, so we're going to lock these in. Okay, so we're a little bit all over the place, but the majority of you guys got the correct answer. It is the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is going to be the lower part of the brain. It is a neural tissue, meaning it's associated with the brain. And the way that the hypothalamus actually produces hormones is through neurons. And so if you guys remember back to last week, maybe the week before, the neurons have three major parts to them. It has a cell body, an axon, and a dendrite. The cell body is where the hormone like GnRH is produced. It is stored in the axon, or the long leg-like portion, and it's released through the dendrites. All right, so GnRH is produced in the hypothalamus. All right, next question. Get some more people in here. Progesterone, also known as P4, is produced in which tissue? We're starting 15 seconds right now. Five seconds to go. And go ahead and submit them. We're going to lock these in right now. You guys are on it today. I love it. Okay, progesterone is produced in which tissue? Ah, okay. All right, all right. So progesterone is going to be produced by the ovary, specifically the corpus luteum on the ovarian structure. So progesterone is the hormone of pregnancy. So when it is produced by the ovary, its main target during pregnancy is the uterus. So we know that progesterone targets the brain, the uterus, the cervix, and the vagina. But as far as where progesterone is produced, and so this is where you guys have to start really paying attention to what I'm actually asking in the questions. Progesterone is produced from the ovary, specifically the CL on the ovary. All right, next question. Let me check my chat. I'm not quite sure what we're seeing. Excellent. Okay. Thank you guys for taking care of your classmates in the chat. So, all right, next question. Activate it. Estrogen or estradiol is produced in which tissue? 15 seconds starting now. Five to go. All right, let's go ahead and lock these in. Okay. Responses. Okay. Let's talk about estradiol. So estradiol is a steroid, like progesterone and testosterone. Estradiol is not produced in the uterus, but it is a target tissue of estradiol. So the uterine, the endometrial layer of the uterus is a target tissue of estradiol. So estrogen is produced primarily from the ovary. All right. So we also see estradiol be produced to a lesser extent in the placenta, but the placenta is only going to be in place when a pregnancy is actually occurring. And so when we talk about the cyclicity of our females, we are mostly talking about estradiol coming from the ovary. And so again, estradiol in this sense is produced from the ovary primarily. All right, next question. Activate it, start our timer. ECG is produced in which tissue? 15 seconds starting now. 5 seconds to go. All right, let's go ahead and lock those answers in. Let's look at our responses here again, all over the board. Okay, thank you for participating. I'm happy you guys are at least trying to apply some of this knowledge. So equine chorion gonadotropin, also abbreviated as ECG, is produced in the placenta. And so ECG is a really good indicator of pregnancy. And so that if we're blood testing animals for pregnancy, that is what we would test for, is the high amounts of ECG. All right. Let's go to our next question. We're going to start 15 seconds. Let me get it activated. Okay, now it's activated, just started 15 seconds. Follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, is produced in which tissue? Five seconds to go. All right, let's go ahead and lock these answers in. See where we're at here. Okay, FSH. Yes. Okay, good job, guys. So the majority of you guys got the correct answer here. So FSH is produced by the anterior pituitary gland. So that is the piece or the part of the pituitary that actually evolves from the roof of the mouth upwards. The posterior pituitary evolves from the base of the brain downwards, and then they connect. Okay, so they connect together. And so that anterior pituitary gland has a very different tissue type compared to the posterior. And it actually has cells in it that will produce hormones. And so FSH is absolutely produced from the anterior pituitary. Okay, great job. Let's go to our next question. It activated. All right. PGF2 alpha, or prostaglandin F2 alpha, is produced in which tissue? Five seconds to go. Excellent. We're going to go ahead and lock these answers in. Let's look at what we got here. Okay. So PGF2 alpha is produced not in the posterior pituitary. All right. So PGF2 alpha is going to be produced in response to an absence of pregnancy in the uterus. So as after an egg ovulates on the female's or from the female's ovary, it's going to go into the oviduct, and it's going to wait for a sperm cell to be there. If a sperm cell shows up and fertilization takes place, what would normally happen is that egg or that embryo would move down the oviduct into the uterus, the uterine horn, and attach. And that attachment actually prevents PGF2 alpha from being produced. And so that is going to be basically shut off as long as there's a pregnancy in place. However, if fertilization doesn't take place in the oviduct, or if the embryo isn't strong enough to attach and gets flushed out of the system, then the absence of an embryo will actually cause PGF2 alpha to be produced. Okay, so PGF2 alpha is produced from the endometrial layer of the uterus, right? And its primary target is going to be the ovary. Right. So it has PGF2 alpha is a fatty acid. It is metabolized very, very quickly. It never has the chance to make it to the brain. Therefore, it has no effect on the brain or the pituitary gland. All righty. Next question, guys. Get it activated. Testosterone or T4 is produced in which tissue? You guys are on it. Five seconds to go. And good job, guys. We're going to go ahead and lock these in. Let's see what we got in the testy. Yes, fantastic. Good job. All right. So, the testy's not chosen here, but it's fine because that is the answer. So we also see testosterone being produced in smaller quantities in the ovary, and we'll learn more about that with cyclicity. And then we also see it produced to a milder extent in the uterus as well. And so, but even though there's not a check mark here, the testy is absolutely where we see the majority of testosterone being produced. Make a note and go back and change that question. Excellent. Okay. Next question. Getting closer. All right, time starting now. Luteinizing hormone, or LH, is produced in which tissue? All right, 5 seconds to go. All right, let's go ahead and lock those answers in. All right, so luteinizing hormone is the cooperator to FSH. So FSH and LH are actually both produced in response to GnRH coming from the hypothalamus and binding to its receptor in the anterior pituitary cells. And so when that happens, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone both will be produced by the anterior pituitary. All right, I think we're getting close on questions here. So next question. Gonatotrope cells are located in which tissue? Starting the time now. Five seconds to go. All right, let's lock in those answers. Thank you guys for participating. Okay, so gonatotrope cells are going to be located in the anterior pituitary gland. So as I mentioned a few questions ago, the anterior pituitary gland is going to be the part of the pituitary, which actually evolves and develops from the roof of the mouth upwards, whereas the posterior pituitary evolves from the base of the brain downwards. And then they connect together. So even though they look like one organ, they're still separated between the two different compartments. And so the anterior pituitary gland has a very different tissue structure than the posterior pituitary gland. Anterior pituitary is actually going to have a very large mass of cells that produce a lot of different hormones. Reproductive hormones are just a small percentage of that. The posterior pituitary gland, actually, when it evolves down from the brain tissue, it pulls neurons down with it. And so that is where we see that's where we see hormones that are released from the posterior pituitary gland, but not produced from the posterior pituitary gland. So in this case, gonadotroph cells are going to respond to GnRH by producing LH and FSH, and all of that happens in the anterior pituitary gland. All right, that may be our last question. Let me look. Oh, nope. Let's do this one really quickly, just to see how we are doing. So, okay, so GnRH has which type of chemical classification? I'll give you 20 seconds here, because we're really not getting to that until this week, but we've mentioned it a lot of times. All right, 5 more seconds. Great. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and lock these in here. Okay. Yeah, most of you guys got it. So GnRH is a neuropeptide. It's produced from the hypothalamus in the lower part of the brain, specifically from hypothalamus neurons. So neurons are really, 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 really tiny. Therefore, GnRH, even though it is technically a protein or a peptide, or technically it's a protein because it has an amino acid structure, it's actually a really, really tiny protein. So we call small proteins peptides. And so GnRH is produced from the brain, neuro, and is a protein, but a small one, peptide. So neuropeptide. So good job on this one, guys. Excellent. Okay, that is the end of rapid fire questions. So overall, you guys, for the most part, had the right ideas. So just using your reaction buttons, guys, just give me, let me see. Let's do it this way. Give me a green check mark or a red check mark to signify your comfort with hormones and where they're produced in the system. So how comfortable are you with where hormones are produced? If you're very comfortable, you are a green check mark. If you are not comfortable at all, you are an X box or red X box. Okay, let me look at this. Okay, I am seeing way more red X's than I am green check marks. And that's okay. You guys have only just been through this material last week, and you haven't really had a chance to commit it to memory. So now's the point in time that I want to take a couple of minutes and have you guys interact with me. Tell me how you are going to move forward to getting a better handle on where hormones are produced. How will you do that? Let's throw some ideas out.
I think flashcards would be good.
Yeah, flashcards is a great idea.
Making real flashcards and using Quizlet ones as well.
Yeah. I know Quizlet. I used to have an assignment associated with Quizlet. But I'm old school. I like paper things that I can touch and walk around with. So I know if you guys have ever been in livestock judging, one of the things that or coping mechanisms, as I fondly call them now, please make sure Clay knows that, is I learned to memorize while I'm moving. So I will pace to memorize something, and that activity really just helps me solidify it into my brain. So everybody does memorization differently. I am a big proponent of memorization. That is going to be critical to you guys being managers in the animal industry, whether you're on the veterinarian side, you're selling pharmaceuticals, you are a nutritionist. You have to have a good understanding of reproduction in livestock, no matter where you're going to be at. So this is something definitely worthwhile to spend some time memorizing. All right, so we've got flashcards, both like physical ones and on Quizlet. What are some other ideas for how you guys can master this material?
Will Labster be a good tool?
I am not very familiar with Labster. I'll be honest. Dr. Smith uses it extensively, so let me check in with him and see if I can steal his sign-on information and see if there's something there. And then if there is, I will try to make that available to you.
All right,
Good
perfect.
suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, Labster. I am just so burned out on technology after the last 2 years that I'm kind of like, oh, another one. But I've heard good things about Labster, so I will look into it. Any other ideas for how to master hormone production? Is there a chart or something you can review? Absolutely. So Gabby, thank you for asking that question. So I'm going to share something with you. Oh, you know what? I bet I deleted it. Let me pull it back up. So in the lecture, in the note guide, you guys should have let me look. There we are. The second slide in this week's lecture is actually a chart out of the book, out of the Singer textbook. And I still to this day use this chart all the time just to double check myself. So even though I've been in reproduction, both the practice of livestock reproduction and research side of it for 20 years, I still every once in a while have to come back and check and make sure that I am mastering my hormones. Okay, so there's a lot of information on this table. This is actually at the end of chapter 5 of the Singer textbook. I did illegally scan it and put it in here, so you guys do have this in the note guide as well. And so this is a really good place to start. And if you guys used the question guide from last week, that is essentially what this structure or what the structure is. So let me just stop and go back to Blackboard really quickly. So let's go back to week 5. Let me look at the study questions. All right, so on the study questions, as soon as it gets bigger here, the second page is that chart that you're going to fill in. And so I would really highly encourage you to use this chart as a way to kind of test yourself. So I wouldn't necessarily look at that table I just showed you in the lecture slides and fill it in, because there's no really active memorization happening during that process. So maybe this becomes like the nerdiest bingo game you have ever seen, to where you ask yourself questions, you to, like, you can go across here. So name the hormone. GnRH is named this. It's LH's biochemical classification is this. FSH's source is this, that type of thing. When you get to that level of memorization, you're going to do really, really, really well in this class. All right. So Gabby, I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Okay. So Nicole says that they just did an endo labster for Dr. Smith's class. So I'll steal something from him. So he's my buddy. All right. If you guys will go ahead and clear off the check marks or the red X's, that would be great. Because I don't think I can do it here. Awesome. Okay. So we've got about 20-ish minutes, 18 minutes left. And so what I want to do is kind of step through some of the big concepts that you guys are going to see this week in the second part of endocrinology. So this week is probably more of the application week of endocrinology. Last week was all about kind of raw memorization, where are things produced, what are their target tissues, what are their effects. Okay, so if you don't feel comfortable with those three things, then definitely spend some time back with last week's material. This week, we're really going to apply that. So what you will see this week is how hormones are chemically classified. So we'll go through those really quickly. And where I want to spend the majority of our time is on the mechanism of action. So mechanism of action is really molecular biology. And so sometimes it's really hard for students to visualize. And so I've built in a ton of extra resources. There's some additional YouTube videos on Blackboard that I encourage you guys to watch over and over as many times as you need to, so that you have this process down. Because the way that the chemical structure of a hormone determines the way that it will act in the system to elicit its response or to cause its response. And so it's really essential that we know what those are. All right, so I did have it in today's thing. I didn't look at that. So here's that table again out of the Singer textbook. We are primarily going to concentrate, especially relative to female and male cyclicity, on these hormones that are outlined by the red box. So gonadotropin releasing hormone, clear down to PGF2 alpha. You guys are going to hear those over and over and over again and be tested on them over and over and over again. All right. So as far as the way that hormones are classified, it really goes back to their structure. So we see 4 different types of hormone structures. Hormones can be neuropeptides like GnRH, which are associated with the brain and produced from neurons, but are protein in nature and or have an amino acid structure. We call them peptides because they have a short amino acid structure. So just for example, GnRH is only 10 amino acids long, which means there's only 30. This is getting a little bit into the weeds, but for those of you guys that are in genetics, there's only 30 nucleotides associated with the GnRH structure. So a very small gene, a very small protein. That's why we call it a peptide, to distinguish the size of the protein. Oxytocin is also a neuropeptide. It comes from the paraventricular part of the hypothalamus, so still part of the hypothalamic structure, but a different part of it. And it also is a pretty short protein. I want to say it is 28 amino acids long. I would have to look that back up though. All right, so that's one way that hormones can be structured or classified, is based on their chemical neuropeptide structure. A second way is a glycoprotein. So that would be proteins that are coated in sugar for their protection. So LH, FSH, prolactin, HCG, and ECG. The third way chemicals can be classified as something we're probably more familiar with. It's a steroid. Okay, so its chemical structure is completely different. It's not peptide or protein based at all. It's a steroid, it's a cyclic structure. And so those hormones are things that end in "one," right? Or OL. So testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen or estradiol. And then our fourth chemical classification that we're going to talk a lot about is prostaglandins, and these are based as are structured as fatty acids. And so the one that we're going to spend the most time talking about this semester is prostaglandin F2 alpha or PGF2 alpha. All right, so as far as neuropeptides, again, we've talked about this a lot. So very small molecules with few amino acids, and they're joined by peptide bonds in between each one of those amino acids. So, oh, I was completely wrong. Oxytocin is only 9 amino acids long. So GnRH is a little bit bigger by 1 amino acid. All right, our glycoproteins are a bigger structures. So these are going to be protein hormones. So glycoprotein means it's a protein hormone. And the glyco part refers to the sugar or the carbohydrates that are associated with the outside of the structure. So CHO here refers to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are sugars that attach themselves to the main protein or amino acid unit here. So that protein or amino acid unit is going to be sorted into an alpha subunit and a beta subunit. And so an alpha subunit is going to be the same exact structure for LH and FSH, but the thing that differs is the beta structure. So LH will have a different beta structure than FSH will. So that's how we tell the difference between FSH and LH. And so the carbohydrates that are associated with the structure are in place for a lot of different reasons, mostly so that the hormone, the peptides, these subunits don't get chewed up in the blood system. So carbohydrates protect them. They help elongate the half-life of the hormone in the blood system. All right, glycoproteins again are going to be things like FSH, LH, inhibin, activin, and prolactin. All right, and they are really going to elicit their response by binding to a G protein coupled receptor, which we'll briefly talk about here in just a second. All right, the third classification or the third way hormones can be classified are as steroids. So steroids are cyclic structures that have all of these cyclic structures connected to one another. And so steroids, reproductive hormones are going to be things like estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. And so just a couple of comments about steroids is that steroids all start with a cholesterol base. So up here at the top. So this cholesterol base is how all steroids start. So this is a really good thing to think about in times of drought when we are limited on nutrients for grazing animals. If we don't have enough carbohydrates, or if animals are on dirt lots and they're not getting adequate supplementation, the cholesterol isn't present in the body to even start to create or move through this enzymatic conversion process. So that's one of the reasons that we see drought affect reproduction so severely, is because if carbohydrates aren't supplemented, there's no cholesterol base to actually make progesterone and testosterone and estradiol. So that's one of the big reasons reproduction is the first to go in times of drought. All right, and then the fourth classification is fatty acids. So these are going to be lipid structures with unsaturated hydroxy fatty acids. And so they both prostaglandins are derived from arachidonic acid. And so the one that we're going to spend the most time talking about is PGF2 alpha. All right, so that talks a little bit about the classification of hormones. You'll see more detail in the online lectures. What I want to spend the rest of our time, even though there isn't a ton of it on today, is hormonal mechanism of action. And so the way that hormones actually elicit a response, so the way that they target their tissues and cause a response happens two major ways, either through protein hormone action or steroid hormone action. And so with protein hormone action, we're going to spend time talking about a secondary messenger system that is very slow. Steroid hormone action occurs a couple of ways. So steroids can elicit their response through membrane receptors, which is very similar to protein hormone action, or a slower response would be through nuclear receptors. And so with protein hormone action, there's 4 major steps that are going to occur. So the hormone is going to bind the receptor. That is going to activate adenylate cyclase, and that activation of adenylate cyclase is going to occur because when the hormone bound its receptor, so this guy comes down and binds here, the configuration of this G protein changes, and that change, or the configuration of the receptor changes, and that change then targets and creates that G protein to activate itself. And so that's where we will see activation of adenylate cyclase. Once adenylate cyclase is activated, we get a conversion of ATP to cyclic AMP, which is the second messenger system. And cyclic AMP will then activate protein kinase A. And protein kinase A is really going to synthesize new products. So that is the effect of a lot of these protein hormones, is to get protein kinase A activated or upregulated. So those are the 4 major steps of protein hormone action. We don't really have time today to watch a video, but it is linked on Blackboard. I'll show you where that's at here in just a few minutes. And so spend some time watching that, taking notes on that, so you have a good understanding of how these hormones are actually eliciting their response. All right, so with, this is just another picture, sorry, of how protein hormone action occurs. Steroid hormone action, again, our steroids are estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. And so estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone can actually or elicit their response 2 different ways. They can bind to a membrane receptor, very similar to what we just talked about with protein hormones, or they can be like the ghost on Ghostbusters and just go through the cell wall, diffuse through the cell wall, bind to a nuclear receptor, which will take it into the nucleus here. And so this is a very slow response because the steroid has to diffuse through the cell wall here. It's got to bind with a nuclear receptor that is then going to take it into the nucleus. That nuclear receptor will then set down on the DNA or the gene associated with whatever the target is. And that gene will start the transcription and translation process that we've learned about in genetics, or you may be learning about right now. And so what will be produced is first mRNA, which will go out of the cell. And then that mRNA will go to the ribosome and be translated into protein. And so that protein will then either stay in the cell and elicit its response, or it will head out of the cell to its target tissue. And so this is all occurring because something like estradiol diffused through the cell wall here. All right, the other way that that steroids can elicit its response is through, let me just do a different color here, is through a fast response, where the steroid will actually bind to its specific receptor. That receptor is attached to the cell wall. And that receptor, once the steroid attaches, will change to configuration that will upregulate the G protein, will get ATP converted to cyclic AMP, and we will get protein kinases upregulated. So anything with an ASC at the end of it is a signal that it is an enzyme. Okay, so these protein kinases are enzymes that are gonna go do something. They may go put proteins together. They may go cut proteins to activate them. There's so many things that these kinases do. But the important part is with this fast response is that the nucleus is not involved at all, okay? Whereas the slow response over here, the nucleus is the primary job that the steroids are upregulating. All right, so that's just a really brief overview of the mechanisms of action. Again, there's two. There is secondary messenger systems like protein action and fast steroid action. And then there is the slow response of steroid actions, which is the nuclear solution. And so that is just in a really, really quick format. What you guys are going to be seeing this week is that relationship between how a hormone is structured chemically to how it actually elicits its response. And so that is primarily going to be what you guys see on lectures this week. If you haven't already watched through them, I really highly encourage you guys to do the practice questions. I didn't put them together for my benefit. I put them together for yours. So try to schedule some additional time to do those questions before you do the quiz, if you are not already doing that. So I know some people are. All right. Just one general question. If you guys need to book an office hour appointment with me, you can do that through bookings. And so that link is on the syllabus. And I don't really have it right here close without digging to put it into the chat. But on the syllabus, there is a link to schedule an appointment with me. And as the so I think I'm tied up this week, so I have to cancel office hours this week in person, which are usually Thursday mornings 9:30 to 11 on campus, because I have a research meeting that I couldn't reschedule. So no in-person office hours this week. If you guys do want to meet with me, I can try to squeeze you in. I'll be in Chico Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week. So shoot me a message, probably on email. I'm getting really bogged down with Pronto because you guys are doing such a good job trying to find groups that I'm seeing like 40 messages. And it's really hard to keep up to the ones that are specific to me. So if you guys are going to use Pronto, please make sure to tag me in that. I think that's a thing. I hope I just told you the correct thing. But email is still preferable. I look at email about 15 times a day. So, all right. That is that. So that is the end of endocrinology. And next week, we're going to get into puberty and you are going to see me geek out big time. So anyway, I hope you guys have a good week. Yeah, schedule some time to concentrate on repro this week if you can. All right, guys, have a great day. The only one with that question.
Okay, yeah, because I know there's a few hormones that have like different, like where they're placed based like what, based off like what other like different things they do. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, I think so the best way to do the best, most complete way to do flashcards is I'm
Mhm.
going to share my screen with you again. I'm going to go back to this right here. All right. So with this, here is how I would do this. And this is the way that worked for me in graduate school. I was not smart enough to figure this out where when I was in your guys' shoes in this class as an undergrad, but I did figure this out in grad school and it helped a lot. So I would make different categories of flashcards. So I like colored flashcards. I don't know about you, but I
Mhm.
would have one color for biochemical classification, one color for whatever this is that isn't for source, one for male tissue, one for female, one for male primary action, one for female primary action. And then I would make the front side of those flashcards
Mhm.
just the name of the hormone. And then the back side of those flashcards, the information for the color. So for example, I'm not doing a very good job like color coordinating. So I would take like purple flashcards and
Mhm.
I would know that they are all going to be about biochemical classification.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
and then so on that first one, the front blank part or the front part of the card would just say GnRH. And
Mhm.
on the back, the biochemical classification would be neuropeptide.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
and then I would do
Like source in a different color, but on the same card, right?
a source in a different color on a different card.
Oh, on a different card.
Yeah. So if you make these blue, then you can have GnRH source on the front side. And on the back side, you can have hypothalamic surge and tonic centers.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So that would be like one color. And then like for male target tissue, you could have a different set or a different color of flashcard. You would do GnRH male target tissue on the front side, and then on the back side, anterior lobe of the pituitary.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah. And so all the way across here, like the front side of your card is just going to be GnRH biochemical classification or GnRH source or GnRH male target tissue, that type of thing. But
Mhm.
the answers are going to be very specific.
Yes. Okay.
So does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
For
cool.
sure. Yes.
I'm so glad you asked that
Like
question.
during the review, like I knew I just got like my things mixed up because I wasn't sure like if it was a tissue we're going off of because I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just bring up my question if I was to do flashcards, what specific should I put on the flashcards, like either tissue or like what like where they synthesize or like all of that.
Yep. So I
Uh-huh.
think that is a really good way to at least get started.
Uh-huh.
Here is my goal for you when we get to the end of the semester is that I give you guys a hormone and you can tell me everything about that hormone. And then you can tell me when it's upregulated, when it's downregulated, what target tissue it's going to go to, and the effect that it has on that target tissue.
Right.
So it's like a map. Each hormone has a map of action. And so we're going to build that map over the next few chapters,
Mhm.
but we need to have a really good understanding of this foundational information because that foundational information dictates how the hormone will act in the map. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, and I think like how you're saying like the color coordination with like the specific like columns that's on the table, I think that's the best way.
Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. I'm glad you asked that question. So I'll just put a note on today's Zoom lecture, like down at the bottom of today's module, that you and I had a short discussion about flashcards, just in
Okay.
case anybody else was interested.
Okay, yes, sounds good. Thank you.
Great. You bet. Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you too.
All right. Bye-bye.